Hey, this is David Hayter. You may know me as the screenwriter of films like X-Men, X-Men 2, and Watchmen, but you probably know me best as the voice of Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid. And you're listening to Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. Kept you waiting, huh?
Where your information can be fished out, as well as your computer, phone, tablet, or what have you. A lot of people don't realize that video game consoles can be subject to being compromised as well. So there's a device that's out, and it's one that I strongly believe in. It's one that we here at the Kasanova Podcast utilize, and that is the Trend Micro Home Network Security. And it is a simple device that you plug into your router, and it basically safeguards your devices. It doesn't matter what from, because if it's on your network, it's going to be protected. And that includes your tablets, your phones, your computers, and also your gaming console. It looks at the traffic that's coming in and out to make sure that there's nothing that's compromising it. And anything can compromise your devices, from apps to websites. Some sites have malware, spyware, and ability for it to be compromised and backdoored for hackers to get. Same thing with apps. Same thing that can happen with game consoles. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you're protecting yourself. And also for parents, one of the things that I think you guys would absolutely love with the Trend Micro Home Network Security is the fact that you have a notification anytime your kids are on the internet. It will notify you if they're on sites that they're not supposed to be on, or sites that have any type of compromising capability. You can also, if you want to fine tune it and safeguard your kids' access to the internet, you can limit what sites they go to, as well as how often the devices that they have, how often they can go on the internet. It's really a great device that I highly recommend to anyone out there looking to safeguard their devices. It's great for individuals, small businesses, big businesses, and most importantly of all, it's good for families. You can safeguard your information, make sure you're not being compromised, you're safe on the internet, your kids are safe, and that's what's really important. So with that being said, make sure you go and safeguard your devices and your information. And for me and for the Kasanova Podcast, we stand fully behind Trend Micro Home Network Security. Get yours today, link below, and get yourself the best device for home network security, which is also in the name. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova, coming at you with another phenomenal interview, and I've got the one, the only, Dan Raidhyn Nichols. Man, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Mekel? Good to be on the podcast today. I'm doing good.
I know, man. It's you've had a hugely busy day. Like throughout the entire week, you're always busy. Like when I talk to you, you're like, yo, I've got back to back stuff. And I'm like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I've definitely become a slave to my Outlook calendar, where like I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, oh, I stayed up too late playing games last night. What do I have today? And I'm just like, okay, let's start, and it's just going down the list. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Yeah, man. And I have that same problem too. Like I stay up to and here's the thing. I think the audience may not know this, but you and I, we have like we have a 6-hour time difference. So like by the time it's midnight for me, it's 6 a.m. for you. So like and for most people that I interact with on a daily, most companies and whatnot, and they're like, oh, Mekel, did you get my message? Are you up? I'm like, it's midnight.
Yeah, man, I can't even imagine. It's got to be really wild living in, that it's got to be like living its own universe sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it sometimes. So yeah, man, go ahead and introduce yourself, man. Tell folks about you and what you do. I mean, you're the CM over
Adult Swim games for Samurai Jack and the upcoming game, which you guys should be definitely prepping for and pre-ordering. And yeah, how's it
If we
going?
had pre-orders up, I would tell you guys to do that. But we
Definitely.
don't have it up yet. Yeah, so I'm Dan. I go by Raidhyn on the internet. Nobody really knows me by that name because it's impossible to pronounce unless you were part of the Brawlhalla community, which is where I worked at before I was moved to Adult Swim Games. So yeah, I do all the community stuff. I also run a bunch of our customer service activities, in addition to doing all the influencer management, social media management, and a bunch of other things for all the games that pass through the glorious walls of Adult Swim. So yeah, it's been awesome. Really enjoy working at Adult Swim. Definitely getting those nostalgia feels sometimes. More so when we got to go into work, going into work and getting to walk past like art of like, Cowboy Bebop and Aqua Teen Hunger Force was mind blowing, when I first started working there. But yeah, so it's good stuff.
Yeah, man. And if you don't mind, like what's the typical day to day like for you?
So like I said, I'm a slave to my calendar.
Mhm.
But it's interesting. So we're a pretty small team at Adult Swim Games, but it's a lot of coordinating with our dev teams, with our product teams, and with all the games that we have out in the wild, just like making sure that we're communicating. And it's interesting, like I get to do a lot of advocating for players, and it's my job as a community manager to be the bridge between all of the players and all of the people working on games behind the scenes, right? So I get to do a lot of communicating. Means I'm in a lot of different meetings while also being like, wait, let me respond to this tweet. Oh, hey, this guy's hitting me up real quick. I got to get back to him. So it's a good mix of stuff. Like there is a bit of routine, as far as like, hey, we've got weekly check-ins, we got weekly status reports and things like that. But a lot of it, because I'm working with players and streamers and content creators and stuff, like a lot of it's very spontaneous, where it's like, oh, hey, this guy reached out, let's go talk to them for a while. Let's see if they're interested in playing Samurai Jack when it comes out. Let's see if they, I got hit up like 2 or 3 times this week for charity streams, because people are doing their fundraising for St. Jude's. And like one of the things I do is support charity streams with game codes, right? So they'll hit me up and I'll be like, all right, here's a 4-pack for Duck Game, here's some of our other titles, please take these and go out and do the good work. And being able to support stuff like that is one of my personal pleasures. But yeah, it's always a mix.
Okay. Yeah, man. And let's talk about the upcoming Samurai Jack, man. What do you want? What can you share about that? Like how it's coming up. It's a very beloved franchise. I definitely grew up with it. I think almost all of us grew up with it. That kind of depends though. If you were born like in 98, 99, 2000, maybe you were too young to remember it, but Samurai Jack was such a phenomenon. It just hit, and for a lot of us, like Cartoon Network, especially Adult Swim, like it was our childhood.
Yeah.
So
yeah, man, it's Samurai Jack's like special for a lot of people because there really wasn't any other kind of show like it at the time. It was a lot more grown up than everything else that was airing. It was very serious. There were funny moments, but the overall plot was very serious. The way that the design of it, even like the sound and everything, was just super unique. So yeah, it's been really cool getting to work with like getting to work with an IP that I grew up on. It's very humbling in a lot of ways because you're given like responsibility for this thing. But yeah, it's been something like the whole team's just really enjoyed working on it. We announced the game back at PAX East, right before PAX East. We threw a big party at PAX East. It was all Samurai Jack themed. It was really awesome. And then yeah, we're still working on the game. We're still pushing towards a summer release, and it's going to be really, really exciting. Like, of course, like this whole pandemic COVID thing threw a wrench in everybody's initial plans, but we've been able to adapt pretty well, and we're still pushing for it. So I can't really reveal any details about it, but I'm really looking forward to like kind of once we release the the floodgates on information and can start showing people more stuff, it's going to be really cool.
Definitely, man, definitely. And speaking of the the COVID-19 situation that's going on, the pandemic, like how is that both for you professionally and personally, like how is that impacting like your workflow when it comes to work and as well as like your personal life, like because for a lot of us, like we're so used to getting out, going places or getting out to exercise and just being stuck on a stay-at-home order. It does a number. It does a number on us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an adjustment, man. I mean, I think I went through like the several stages of nonsense that everyone felt when all this started going down, where at
Mhm.
first it was like, I need to read every single piece of information I can to ensure to myself that this is real. And
Mhm.
then into this state of like, oh my God, our planet is being run by idiots and we're all screwed. And then, and then like moving on from the next stage to like, all right, how much hazmat gear do I have left over for my military days so that I can go and I can take that with me to the supermarket so I don't die.
Mhm.
To like, oh shoot, now I work from home, which is fine for me. Like I like working from home. I have a family that I love to death. My wife takes care of me and like brings me silent coffee that she just like sneaks over to me when I'm in the middle of meetings, which is great. She's amazing. And like she worked from home before as well. So she's just like, yeah, this is what I was doing before, whatever. Um, my son is almost a teenager now, so he's super independent. So like I'm lucky. I like all of this, but for a lot of folks, it's been difficult with, they've got little kids at home, 2-year-olds who don't know how to detach from you.
Mhm.
Um, other folks have like, live with, their elderly parents or grandparents. You've got people with like, 3 dogs, all of whom want attention all at the same time. So
Mhm.
it's definitely different for everybody. And I know that like no matter how good or bad the circumstances, like everybody had an adjustment period. Like I'm still like planning out my whole rest of the year because there's no more events, which was a huge thing for me.
Mhm.
Um, and without that, there's a lack of like cadence that the whole game industry kind of relies on for a lot of
Mhm.
the activities related to like marketing, promotion, community events, meeting and maintaining relationships with streamers and content creators, reaching out to other companies. Like there's a lot now that we're figuring out how to do more proactively because we can't just be like, oh yeah, let's set up a meeting with them at the next PAX or E3 or DreamHack or whatever.
Mhm.
So it's definitely been an adjustment.
Yeah, and and speaking of which, like with the changes made with all the events being canceled, of course, the most major one being E3 being canceled, which was a shock to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And then we're not sure it has. So all of the events have been canceled. So Gamescom and everything like that, and have all
Yeah,
been.
I think so far they haven't, most event organizers past August. I think
Mhm.
Gamescom was like the latest one out because that was early August.
Mhm.
PAX West hasn't officially canceled yet. You haven't seen TwitchCon officially canceled yet. They're all gonna get canceled, man.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like that's my opinion, is that we're not gonna see any events until sometime next year. Like this isn't me like with any inside knowledge. This is just my
Mhm.
opinion. But it's a thing where the event organizers have this thing where they can't cancel too early because if they do, then insurance won't cover it. A lot of people
Mhm.
are waiting for like government mandates in order to close down their events so that they can get out of their contracts with vendors and venue and all these other things. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of like weird logistical reasons for why everybody isn't just like, oh hey, yeah, we'll see you in 2022. Like everybody has to kind of play the line for as long as they can due to just how much it costs to throw an event and what
Yeah.
they can do to actually get out of it without going bankrupt. So it's wild. It's a wild time.
It yeah, it's one of those things like you never would have thought, like, and especially in our lifetime, because you and I we're around the same age. Like this is not something we ever would have envisioned happen. Like this is something we see in movies or something like The
Yep.
Last of Us or something like
Yep.
that. You know?
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's I don't know, like I used to during the first, back in March when this first started going down, like I used to
Mhm.
dwell on it a lot and think about it a lot and feel like I had to express my thoughts and feelings about it a lot. Now I'm just kind of more resigned, where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to work from home for a really long time, and that's okay. I just got to figure out how to like do the job from here, and keep trying to like bring people the joy of video games, and like all the things that we already liked about being part of a games community is probably even more important now, like having people who are share your interests, who are, good to hang out with. Like more than ever now, I feel like people are leaning on like that social aspect of gaming, because like, it's not like you're going to the club every Friday. You're not having your buddies over for, cookouts. You're not doing like whatever it was you did before. So, hey man, video games,
Yeah, unless you're my neighbors. So for whatever reason, for some ungodly reason, dude, my neighbors party every freaking day. Like, it's insane. I'm over here like, yo, do you guys have a day where you just chill and you're not doing anything? They're like literally having cookouts, cookouts, barbecue, like just having beer fest. And I'm over here like, so Hawaii went through a couple periods where they were doing like this whole temporary curfew thing. Like they were trying to do it because people won't stay home here.
Sure.
I don't know why it is like here people won't stay home. They keep going to the beach. And our cases kept rapidly growing. Like we went from 2 cases to like, well, right now we're over 600 within the last on this island alone. Like within the last couple weeks, it just started growing because people, the mentality was, oh, that's a mainland thing. That's not anything that's going to affect Hawaii. It's a general ignorance of this being a global pandemic. And it's like, you keep seeing it and it frustrates me because it's like, I want to say something like, yo, we have a pandemic going on, but then I'm like, it's not my place to tell you, but it's like, there was a point where I was sharing my opinions on it too, and I just got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I'm a full-time creator. I do podcasts.
Yeah.
I review games. I can just sit in comfort in my air-conditioned room in Hawaii. You know what? I'm just gonna show up and just deal with
it. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I've gotten to, is this like, people are gonna be idiots. That's their prerogative. Like, will it eventually lead to the deaths of innocent people? Yes. Yeah. But I also can't like police that, and I can't put that on myself, I can't be like just stewing in my room looking at tweets all night about people doing dumb stuff everywhere and going like, why? Like that type of response just isn't gonna help anybody. So I've been trying to, figure out how to maintain my own mental well-being, and and like I still do all the things. I like Georgia reopened, right? Like what was it, a week or 2 ago? It's like, okay, well, that's cool. Like, good for you guys. I'm still going out with a mask. I'm still going out with gloves. I'm going out with hand sanitizer. I'm going out. I'm limiting contact. Because I do all of our shopping runs and stuff, which in Georgia means you're driving, anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes to get to where you're going.
What?
Yeah, because like everything in Georgia is really spread out. So like I go up to Gwinnett to go shopping at the Korean grocery store because they practice the best hygiene out of anybody in the state. So I get up there, and they're disinfecting all the carts before they hand them to you. They've got, everybody inside is wearing masks and gloves, like everyone's social distancing. They got all that stuff set up. So I go there because I feel a lot more comfortable. It's a half-hour drive, right? So yeah, and like I keep those excursions down to like once every other week possible, but yeah, it's fun. Just like, all right, this is what I'm doing now for at least a while, It's not gonna bother me any. I'm gonna come home and play Final Fantasy or Valorant or whatever and have a good time,
Dude, I've been meaning to play, like, cause I know we're in the Discord group together, man. I've been meaning to hit you guys up to play Valorant or Final Fantasy because, like, man, I'm at this point now, dude. I'm reviewing so much stuff at once between that and then the show. Like, a lot of people are like, "Yo, you want to play a game?" I'm like, I got a deadline. I got to get this game in. I got to get my impressions or my review in, or get them to look over and say, oh, okay, maybe, because when you're doing reviews for certain games, like some companies have like guidelines, like certain stuff, like I'm doing with
Yeah, you got to be within a certain window because otherwise it doesn't
yeah.
matter. Then they're just like, you gave you the game for free.
Yeah, like one of the things, like I'm working with Nintendo right now for what's the game? Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. And like one of the things is a lot of content creators who have it, some of them are putting out way too much information for like the extended part of it. And a lot of them were telling me, they're like, well, Nintendo was telling me, they're like, hey, only to this point, and I'm trying to reference my review only to this point.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people, it's so funny because I get so much shit from people. Like they'll be like, oh, you got paid to do this review, you got paid to do that. I'm like, I guess if getting a review copy of a game early is considered payment, yes, but other than that, my opinions are my own. Like I just have to stay within certain parameters. That's the mentality that you have to stay within.
Yeah, that stuff's wild, man. It's so funny, like, because I don't know if we talked about this when last we spoke, but like the way that I wandered my way into the industry was by making a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So I'm very sympathetic to the plights of content creators and understanding the kind of position that I'm in, where I'm just like, yep, here's the review code, do it this way, please. Like because it's always interesting, like, because from the industry side of things, like, we look at that as like we have a very limited window of time where people are actually going to care about the game and what people are saying about it, right? And so like everything has to be compressed into this small period of time so that we actually like have a moment, where people might actually hear a conversation about a game when there's, thousands of games being released a year now. So it's like, yeah, it's really challenging, because there's this weird, kind of push and pull between what's possible for creators and what's acceptable from the community, and then like what the objectives are of the people who are, distributing codes, and what they need in order for like that method of marketing to actually be successful, because I'm always in the place where I'm like, man, I just want to hook people up with video games, like left and right, like like the way that I qualify like creators to get review codes is probably different from everyone else, because I'm always like super sympathetic to the hustle. Like if I see somebody with like 100 subs but they're posting videos like every day or putting up like reviews like once a week, and I'm just for months and putting in all the work, I'm like, yeah, this guy needs it. This gal needs the help. They need the hookup, right? They've got all the effort, they've got all the talent that they just haven't gotten there yet. Maybe this will help them, push them over the edge. They'll get that like SEO bump they need to draw in some people. And so I always have that mix of perspective when trying to work with folks, because it's definitely not just something where it's like, yeah, let's just send out like 1,000 codes and hope for the best. But it's challenging because everybody's got their own objectives out of it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I just hope people like eventually find a game they like and enjoy it.
Yeah, dude, and let's talk about, like, I because I know, and for those who may not know, and if you don't know, shame on you, you should know. Dan has a show on Twitch called Meet the Industry, and this is actually how we came to meet, actually.
Yeah.
And it's a very good show, where it's not very good, it's a fucking excellent show, where it's
I wouldn't go too far.
Hey, my show.
I just have excellent people come on. That's the trick. I just let the people be the forefront.
So it's like, so with your show, like, you have different people from the industry, content creators, and more, and just having organic conversations. And it's like, this is how, for anyone who's curious, this is how we met. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about, like, before we even talk about that, let's talk about how you got into the gaming industry. You just touched on it briefly with saying, like, you started with YouTube and whatnot. And dude, you know a lot about good, like, YouTube, SEO, all that stuff. Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So the story of me wanting to make video games goes back to when I was a young child, and my father, who was a COBOL programmer, had a 286 PC sitting in our basement that ran Qbert. So yeah, I always wanted to make games. My dad gave me like a Visual Basic 2.0 book when I was 7 with a floppy disk in it, and was like, here you go, son, here, go learn how to code. I was like 8 when I learned how to make a Hello World application. And I also didn't realize as a young kid that I had zero talent or knack for programming, like at all. I went to school for computer science, and I dropped out like 2 years later because I just couldn't, like, I found like no joy in programming whatsoever. I had zero talent as an artist. Like I couldn't draw for anything. I did a lot of music, but I didn't realize that sound design was like a thing. Like no one ever explained to me that was a profession when I was a young person, right? So I gave up on my video game making dreams, and I hit the reset button, and I joined the military. Years later, I get out, I go back to school. I'm like, I'm going to get a marketing degree because I was a public affairs guy in the military. So, you know, it was either marketing or journalism. And I was like, let's go for the thing that's trending up. So I went and got a marketing degree. And luckily enough for me, the person who ran our computer lab at Columbia College Chicago, shout outs to Columbia College, he used to work for Sega like back in the day and was part of the games industry. He got out, you know, like later on in life when he wanted to spend more time with his family and whatnot, and landed a job running like the computer systems for the marketing department. And he was like, you realize video game companies need marketing folks, right? I was like, well, yeah, but like those are impossible jobs to get. And he's like, no, they're not. Just go to this thing called GDC. I'll refer you into the volunteer program so you can get like a $2,000 ticket for free if they take you in. And then you can go and network your way into the industry. And I was like, okay, why not? So I went to GDC 3 years in a row. I started doing pro bono marketing work for indie developers. I did consults. I worked on Kickstarters. I did green lights. Like I just took all the marketing knowledge that I had and started trying to apply it to people that needed the help, right? Because developers are not the best at marketing their games. And then despite all my efforts, I went and I couldn't get hired anywhere. I had a bunch of interviews at a bunch of different great places, and none of them worked out. So I stayed in Chicago. I was working for a marketing firm that I actually had worked part-time for while I was still a student. And as part of all that, I was their digital marketing manager. So I ran the website, I ran all the social media, I did our email marketing and all this stuff. And like at the time, everyone was like, yeah, it's 2014, video is like the hot thing. If you don't know how to do video, like you're not going to be able to make it anywhere in this field. We all need to understand how video works. So I was like, all right, well, I finally have a job so I can afford to buy things. And I really wanted an excuse to like learn video editing. So let's like spruce up my computer a bit, and then let's get a YouTube channel up by the time the Binding of Isaac Rebirth comes out, because I'm so hype on that game. And I'll just make a YouTube channel. I'll run it for like a year, and I'll learn the ins and outs of this thing. And then as part of that early effort, like a month after my channel existed, I ran into a code for Brawlhalla, and I had just started doing like really short, like 5 to 10 minute like reviews of a couple of sporadic indie games that I'd run into. So I was like, oh, let's do it on Brawlhalla next. And like the video just popped on my channel, so I just kept making Brawlhalla content because nobody else was at the time. Met the devs, beat them in a tournament, and then hit him up afterwards. It was like, hey, I'm a real human being. Here's my LinkedIn profile. By the way, I do marketing consults for indie devs. Like if you guys ever want to chat about stuff you could do while you're in beta, let me know. I'd love to talk because your game is great. And then things kind of continued on from there. And 6 months later, they reached out to me and were like, hey, if you came and worked for us when we launched the game from closed to open beta, tell us what your role would look like. And somehow they decided to trust me enough to give me a job. And that's how I ended up in the industry. I ran the marketing and community efforts for Brawlhalla from closed beta to launch on PlayStation. I was there for about 2.5 years and like learned an absolute ton of stuff working on that game with those folks. So it's yeah. So that's how that happened. And then afterwards, Adult Swim just happened to be needing a community manager. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do one job instead of two. You know, that'd be great. Let's narrow down the hats a little bit. So yeah, I've been really fortunate to kind of like have a bunch of skills and hone a lot of different experience over the years that seemed really unrelated at the time.
Mm-hmm.
To being able to have all of those things ready for once I knew what I really wanted to do. And so like even
Mm-hmm.
though it didn't pan out initially with all those failed interviews at all those places, like I managed to find a way into the industry, and now here I am. So it's been good.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. For the audience and anyone who's going to be listening to this, either watching it live or listening to it later when it goes up on iTunes and everything like that. Um, there's no one clear path into the games industry. It's so varied. Like, with every guest I've had on this in the industry, from Capcom to Nintendo to, Bandai Namco to you, like everyone's got a different journey into this. And that's the fun thing, hearing that journey, like how you got started, like what was the motivating factor. Cause for a lot of us, like back when we were kids, like, let's hop in the DeLorean and go back to the 90s. Like there was no, like, if you were to say back then you wanted to work in the video games industry, you wanted to, do community manager work, or if you want to review games, or you want to, be a games journalist, people would laugh at you because there was no, like, that concept of employment was just strange to people back then. Whereas like now it's like gaming is so mainstream, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I think there's a lot of
Sorry, that was my alarm.
the way that I have to describe it to my dad now, who is a very old conservative man, is like, well, here's this Wall Street Journal article explaining how the games industry makes more money every year than music and movies combined. So here's a nice statistic for you. It's funny how much mobile games in particular and all the revenue that is generated out of that, like, kind of legitimizes the entire industry for a lot of folks who aren't part of it, because all you got to do is be like, yeah, here's $100 billion in, in sales, and people are like, what the, I'm like, oh yeah, you had the $300 million movie week. Guess what? That's like Fortnite's Tuesday, like whatever. So it's interesting, but I feel really lucky to have been able to transition, even though it was later in my career. Like I joined the Army when I was 19. I was a photojournalist, right? So like I wrote stories, I shot photography, I designed magazines, I built websites, I did all of this public communication stuff. I wrote social media policies for the Army way back in 2009. Like I was doing all this stuff that at the time I didn't realize that was one day going to help me write patch notes, and it was going to help me, run verified Twitter accounts for video games, or that it was going to help me with professional communication, or how to act when I'm meeting a business partner for the first time, or whatever, but everything builds, everything builds. And I think that's kind of like the interesting thing. And it's what I tell like content creators all the time. Like, like Gamer Thumb in the chat was talking about this, like going into YouTube full time is like 28 jobs rolled into one.
Yep.
Like that is the truth, man. Because we were just talking about this on Meet the Industry this morning about how like you learn so many things. Like you're a producer, you're a graphic designer, you're a brand manager, a digital marketer, you're your PR for yourself. You become a photographer, you learn video editing, you learn sound design, sound engineering, sound cleanup. Oh my God, so many sound things that I didn't know until I started making content. Like, holy crap. Like, did you know that there is a just low latent hum that exists in every USB cable? Every USB cable has electrical current being run through it, so that no matter how nice your USB mic is, you'll never get rid of that stuff. And don't tell me you can fix it in post, because by God, I have tried, and no amount of noise reduction will properly eliminate this thing. And that's why I have an XLR mic. It's not because I spent a lot of money on this. This is a $40 mic, because that hum, man, so you learn these things, and eventually it all helps out towards what you ultimately get a paycheck for, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, like I said, like, I'm a full-time content creator on YouTube as well as full-time podcaster. So is Gamer Thumb. And it's like when it's funny because Gamer Thumb and I were having a talk. We're friends outside of it. He's in Florida. And we were talking about how it gets to a point when we're trying to talk to people who either aren't in the gaming industry or aren't content creators. They just don't get it. Like, they don't understand at all what we do, and they think, oh yeah, like he said, like, just hit record and play a game and you're a full-time content creator. Oh, all you do is play video games. Like, when you explain, like, I've tried to explain not only to my parents but to other people I know, like, look, I've got to make sure, like, I went from literally, because that hum that you're talking about, like, I went from a USB mic to XLR, learning how to use a Go XLR interface, and then, getting the Stream Deck, and then, working with all the different things that I do, especially sound is at times more important than the actual video, like trying to make sure you're working with OBS correctly, like the platform I'm using right now, StreamYard, like making sure that doesn't have any type of latency issues when it's redirecting it either to YouTube or to Twitch or to both. There's so much that goes into what we do. And then some people, they just write it off because they're like, oh, I don't understand it. I'm like, okay, so here's the question. Are you trying to understand it, or are you not?
It's a lot of so one of the really cool things that they did in the military when I was out processing was they sit you all down and they try to explain to you how to pull the military part out of your job experience and translate it into the way that like average business people can understand it, right? So they're like, hey, guess what? If you were a sergeant in the Army, you know what they call that out in the real world? They're called managers. And so we're going to talk about your management experience and how you worked with people and supervised them, right? Because that's what you do as a sergeant. So that experience, like, it was pretty easy for me because I had a very commercial oriented job in the military. I didn't drive a tank, I didn't fly a car, I didn't have any of those things. So it was like, okay, these skills are easily translatable. But now I find I end up using that same tactic with content creators when like they ask, like, oh, hey, how do I actually go work in the industry? Like, I want to do what you do. I'm tired of doing what I'm doing. How do I do what you do? And I'm like, okay, well, let's sit down and translate all of your content stuff into what that means for, professional work. Cause there's a ton of things, like everyone's like, yes, we want someone who's very detail oriented. And I'm like, have you ever sat down for 3 hours trying to fix a hum? Huh? A hum? Because only I can hear it? Yeah. Detail oriented. Have you ever gone through a video editing suite and adjusted things by like 3 frames so that it would line up perfectly with your music bed? Like, if that's not detail oriented, I don't know what is.
Oh man, no, and that's the thing too, man. Like, that's the thing is like it's oh man. Okay, so here's one of the other things I always get from people who don't understand what we do. They're like, oh, how do you get paid? They're like, is there job security in what you do? And I'm like, is there job security in what you're doing? And they're like, yeah, I get up, I clock into work. I'm like, hey, I never clock out. I'm making thumbnail. Like, okay, so like the thumbnail for this interview now, it literally, I made that a couple hours ago because I'm like, I don't know how am I gonna, because like, okay, so when I make thumbnails, like, I want to make sure like your, like, my guess is the central focus of it. Like, I've seen other podcasts and from other creators where they're trying to put themselves as the focal point versus their guests. And me, I'm like, oh, I want to focus on my guests. I want you, when you look at it, like, oh, who's this guy, and then have their name and then like some snippet of where they are and then some type of nice background which pushes them forward. A lot of people like, oh, that must have took you like that must have been real quick for you to come up with. And I'm like, no, because I had to teach myself Photoshop and I had to learn, photography, learn what's a good angle of a picture that a guest may have. Like, because even with you, like, I ask you, like, what's the picture you like me to use? I always ask my guests that. And a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you just take something and just throw it? I'm like, no, because maybe they may have something they prefer to use. And so the picture you sent me, I'm like, all right, Let me find a really good background. Let me blend it. Let me throw some blur effects in it. Let me get some nice font to throw in there. And when I was sitting down, I was explaining this to this one girl I know, and she's like, oh, that sounds easy. Oh, right. You want to try it? You want to try it, Buttercup? You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you have disrespect for any kind of job, right? Like, I mean, what does accountant do? Accountants just take numbers in column A and make sure they match up with numbers in column B,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you can make any job sound stupid, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is, like, the first year that I went to GDC, there's no marketing track at GDC. There's business development, and then there's community. But like, I didn't understand the separation between those two things, so I just went to everything. Like, I was like, oh, there's no marketing track. Well, I guess I'll just learn about everybody's job. Like, I went back into journalist mode while I was there, and just like, I treated every person I met like I was having an interview with them. I was just like, oh, so what do you do? How does that work? Tell me more about engine architecture, because I've never had this conversation before. Like, first year I was at GDC, some guy talked to me for 2 hours about GPU architecture and why and why that mattered. And I understood maybe like 2% of it. But what I did realize is that this guy was A, very knowledgeable, B, super passionate, and C, was like the guy that I would want working on my games optimization if I needed to hire a programmer for making sure that I could run on both, NVIDIA and and AMD chips without running into issues when you go back more than 10 years. So yeah, it's like, everybody's job is different, but I always just try to like approach everybody that I meet, no matter what they do, with like a certain level of respect, so that I can appreciate whatever it is that they're bringing to the table. Like, I used to work in fast food. I remember, I used to work in fast food. I used to work retail. I've worked in a freaking factory, right? And like, even within the realm of those jobs, there are things that I've worked with people at McDonald's who are more efficient than most office workers. I've seen people, juggle 5 different load orders at the back of a warehouse faster than someone can collate paper. Like, everybody has a skill, and it's just a lot about just being able to appreciate that.
Definitely, man, definitely. And so about the show, Meet the Industry on Twitch. Like, let's talk about it, man. What was the building foundational bricks of creating that show? And let's talk about it, man.
Yeah. So for me, a lot of it really stemmed from like, I have a thing where I always forget that I'm ahead of the curve on some stuff. So like, all these things got canceled, all the events got canceled, and everybody was kind of running around with, like chickens with their heads cut off. Like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And for me, like, the thing that I've always enjoyed the most about events was just kind of having sporadic conversations with folks when you're in like that networking environment, right? For me, that's like, it's either at parties, it's at the hotel lobbies, it's in front of the show floor before you get onto the show floor, it's when you're walking past your buddy's booth, so you stop and say hi because you see him at every event, and then like 3 more people walk up, and then everyone's talking, and it doesn't really matter what the conversation's about, but it's just kind of that organic meeting of people, and like, oh hey, that's Steve over there, let's get him. Hey, what are you doing, man? Or like, oh, did you see Amy this morning? She told me to meet over here. Oh, you're already talking to her. Okay, cool. Like, those types of things, I think, are part of why everybody immediately started feeling the pain of not being able to look forward to the next event, because those types of interactions with people, especially in this industry, right, where everybody's very passionate about what they're doing. So I just wanted to like figure out a way to quickly get a couple people in a call and just talk, because what I found out is that it's very difficult to, like, I reach out to people individually, and people have reached out to me. There's a lot of hey, how you doing? Are you how are things going? Are you okay? Just checking in, making sure you're doing good with all of this. How's your family? How's your mental health? Those types of things are really great, and they're quick and easy to do on text, but they're not very like engaging beyond just kind of checking in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to schedule like a half hour or an hour call with somebody on a one-to-one basis, because then it's like, okay, if I'm spending an hour with you, who am I not spending an hour with, right? And at some point it becomes too much if you're trying to do that with 100 people. Like, imagine if I scheduled like 100 1-hour interviews with people over the next week, right? There isn't 100 hours in a week for me, that doesn't exist. So I just kind of wanted to just see if people would engage with the idea of like, oh, hey, I'm going to invite a couple people into a Zoom call. There will be like 4 of us, me and 3 other folks, because my experience playing Final Fantasy 14 is that whenever you go past 4 people, that's when communication starts to die. Like, people aren't willing to laugh over something or to talk over somebody else. Like, people conversations start branching into like 2 people talking to each other and a 5th person feeling left out. So I was like, 4 people, and let's just see if folks are interested in this. And I put the idea out there before I had any planning done. because that's how I force myself to do things. Otherwise, I'll overplan. And then, yeah, it had a really, really positive reaction. I feel like it's something that everybody wanted, but nobody had organized yet. So I just kind of got lucky with getting there first, I suppose. Like, I honestly was expecting other folks that I knew to do something like that. There's been a few other things that are kind of like event replacement stuff. Like, there's one of the organizers at PAX does like an industry mixer that's like an invite only, but it's this like giant thing, and it's on Fridays at like 7 or 6, and it's like that's when I cut off for the day to go spend time with my family before I turn into a video game monster at night. So it's so it's been really good. I've had 3. This concludes the 3rd week, so in 3 weeks I've done 15 shows. It's every day. It's a really nice way to spend lunch. It occasionally means that I never get up from my desk. And yeah, so it's good. What I'm planning to do is I'm going to do shows next week, and then I'm taking a week off, and then bring the show back in June and kind of see it, if like 3 weeks on, 1 week off is a good rhythm, or if that ends up being too much over time. But I think as long as people are interested in doing it, I'm going to keep it going, because I've got the process fairly streamlined right now. And even like today we ended up talking a lot about like stream setups and stream skills and other things. Yesterday it ended up being a lot about like marketing and brand marketing and product marketing and stuff. And the day before that it was like all about esports, so the conversation keeps changing every time. But I think each time, like, it's good for me because I feel energized afterwards, being able to connect with people. And I think for the folks who come on, I like to think that it's a highlight. Like, I've had nothing but really good feedback from everybody. And everyone seems to appreciate just being able to go into a video call where they don't have to be like keyed up the whole time, where they can just relax and kind of talk about whatever comes up and socialize and maybe meet a new person or reconnect with somebody that they met, a year ago, but haven't had a reason to reach back out to, or what have you. And it's been real nice.
Nice. Oh, and that's definitely your show has a tremendous value, with being able to have something where people can literally understand more about how the industry is going, like whether it's talking about the the marketing aspect or the esports aspect. Like, that's very, very important, especially now. We have a lot of us have so much free time now. It's like, oh, what are we doing?
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's part of why I decided to do it live, was because I don't care about my channel anymore. Like, I've given up on ever trying to grow my streams or YouTube anymore. Just because that's a whole nother story. But basically, like, the reason I did it live was because, one, I was like, well, if we do it live, then I'll make sure to remember our NDAs. If I do it live, it might be easier or more interesting to get content creators to come on, because I know that, like, for content creators, like, taking an hour away from them is an hour that they're not out there actively making money or generating content, right? And so it's a lot to ask. was like, oh, if it's live, maybe I'll get more streamers, you know, because they can tell their audiences about it and, you know, watch them do this thing. And then the other thing with it for me is like you said, like giving people like a peek behind the veil and being able to see that, like, hey, we're humans. This is affecting us the same way it's affecting you. Like, we're actual people who work on these things. Some of us are old, some of us are young, some of us are black, some of us are white. We're all different. We're all in this because we love games, and we're going to talk about things that you probably talk about too, like Final Fantasy and how Gunbreaker is the best tank, and that's all that you need to know. So, totally biased. It's like Paladin, but with fun combos.
All right. One of the other things like I would ask you about, it's like I guess it's one of the last industry questions I have, but what are your thoughts on the whole Summer Game Fest that's been created by Jeff Keighley?
I think it's really cool. I think that he is one of the few people in the industry poised to kind of do something that's that wide. You know, like he's a well-known figurehead at this point, and he clearly like knows everybody, right? So I think it's really good. Like, I'm not sure how it's gonna play out or what the overall effect is gonna be like, but things like that, things like event organizers taking their events digital, you know, people kind of rallying together under different banners and different ways to put information out about their games and kind of create moments for people. It's really cool. Like, I think everybody is trying to do it different ways. But like, I saw that, I was like, awesome, cool, like this is great. Like, I am every time I see things like that, I'm excited that folks are adapting, you know. And I think it's overall really good. Like, I know in the last 2 days, like, we saw Ghost of Tsushima yesterday, right? Or early this morning when we saw, you know, the information came out. I think it came out at like 2 a.m. my time or something. And we got, you know, the 18 minutes of gameplay and stuff. It looks awesome. I'm really excited about it. You know, because I watch those trailers and I'm watching it like as a games designer and as a like marketing person, where I'm like, oh man, okay, I see why you cut this here. And also I see, like, holy crap, like all these, like, the wheat and the grass is like moving all individually, and that's really amazing. I wonder how long it took to like put that together in the engine. And then like the day before that, we had Paper Mario just like announced out of nowhere, which is super exciting, right? And like, you look at those things and you know, you're like, those are going to be E3 announcements. Like, those were going to be part of, you know, the giant thing. There were going to be booths, there was going to be, you know, trailers, and it was going to be shown during a press conference, you know, with somebody exclusively somewhere. And so like, you miss out on it being part of that big giant E3 thing. But both of those announcements got their moment, they got their time, they got everybody keyed up and excited about it. And like, that's really encouraging for me, and I think everybody in the industry to know that, like, oh hey, like, people are still paying attention, they want the information, they want the leaks. So yeah, so anytime I see stuff like that, I get jazzed up, because it's the one thing the games industry is really, really good at, is like adapting way faster than everybody else, you know, moving at a faster pace and changing up what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, because, you know, we're just at the forefront of technology compared to every other industry, and it's awesome.
No, that Ghost of Tsushima, man, that
looks fun, man. It looks good. Like, it's one of those like game worlds where I'm just like, yeah, I'll turn this on because I just want to walk around in it, you know?
Right? Dude, I was watching it with my wife. We were looking at the trailer the other day, or when it was it a couple of hours it dropped ago? Or was it yesterday? I think
it was like 12 to 15 hours ago, I think.
Yeah. So we were looking at it. See, I'm losing track of time. I'm like you. If it's not on my calendar, I'm not keeping up with it.
Yep.
But like, I was looking at, you know, my wife and I, we were looking at it, and we were just like looking at the environment. Like, we're like, wow, gaming has come so far.
Yeah.
To the point where like the separation between a fictional world and a real world, like that line is further and further getting blurred. Because I'm like, man, this looks like you're literally in feudal Japan. Like, that's crazy. Like, And Neo 1 and Neo 2 and Sekiro, like they look awesome. But this, oh my god.
Yeah, it's a good look, man. I'm excited for it. I think that there's a few games that I'm just like I will just pick up because I'm like, yeah, I just want to run around in that. Like, I don't know if it's good or if it's bad or how much I'm gonna like or dislike certain mechanics. Like, I don't care. Like, I just, you got to play for the feelings.
Definitely. Well, there's something else you and I are very, very passionate about. We're very big fans of, and that is fighting games. You know, I see you got your custom combo breaker outline shell for your fight stick in the back. I see it.
I got the old H wrap, over here. I don't know. Let's see the camera pan. Yeah, he's hiding out in the shells there. I actually got the Mercedes of fight sticks.
Oh, you have the Victrix.
I got the Victrix, baby. So
this is the only thing I got from them. They've sent me both the headphones.
I'm like, headphones, nice.
I'm like, where's
this stick, man? I was actually talking to a good friend of mine at an industry event. It's really late at night, and he asked me about fight sticks, and I went on like a rant for like 20 minutes about why this is the best stick ever. And then he actually just bought me one and sent it to me as a gift, and I was like, holy crap, it's the nicest thing anyone's ever done. Because there's no way, my my poverty ass was gonna go and buy a $320 fight stick. This is really nice. Yeah, so fighting games for me, man, that's been like a whole life kind of ordeal. I first fighting game I ever played was Street Fighter 2 on my cousin's Super Nintendo. I think I was like 7 or 8. And when I got older, me and my brother had a friend of ours who the three of us would always get together and play video games. So when Smash 64 came out, we played Smash for like a year. And then we discovered Tekken. And then Tekken became the thing. Like because we picked it up right before Tekken 3 came out on PS1.
PS1.
Yeah. In like 98. And so transitioned over to Tekken 3, and by God, Tekken 3, that is the game that pulled me in to not just being like, yeah, fighting games are fun, but to actually wanting to get good, right? That whole get good thing. So I remember I was the oldest out of the three of us, and I had to be the best at everything. I was always winning in Smash. So by God, why was I losing in Tekken? and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'm like, I'm older, I'm smarter, I'm faster, I'm stronger. I should not be losing these video games. So I get on GameFAQs and I look up a Tekken guide, and I run into this whole strategic philosophical approach to understanding how Tekken worked. And I read this, and then I got on my mom's LaserJet printer and I printed it out, and I used to just take it with me everywhere, and I would read it in the car trying to absorb all this information. And eventually I got so good at Tekken that I never lost anymore. And then that continued on through college. When I hopped into college 3-4 years later, I was like, all right, so yeah, who's buying the pack of smokes for the apartment this Monday? Let's do a Tekken tag tournament. We're gonna find out. And so we used to do that. But yeah, then when I dropped out of college and joined the army, and I kind of put a pause on video games because Tekken 4 happened, which was a monstrosity. It ruined my love for Tekken for a good minute. And I kind of put it on pause until 2009 when or was it 2008? It was when Street Fighter came out. Street Fighter 4 got released right on top of Blaze Blue from Arc System Works. I think it was either 2008 or 2009. I'd have to check the dates. But that was when I hella got back into it. I bought my first fight stick because I was frustrated with dropping inputs on analog sticks. And I just dove right back in. And I've been kind of just keeping consistent with it ever since. And that was part of how the whole Brawlhalla thing emerged, was because when I went into that game community when it was in closed beta, nobody in that games community was a fighting game player. The fighting game community is very small. Nobody there, like, they didn't know footsies, they didn't know neutral, they didn't know punishment concepts. So I was able to like put out these like really basic videos about like, here's what, you know, punishment is, and here's how it works in Brawlhalla, everybody. So punish works in one of 4 ways, and you know, just going through. But yeah, it was cool. Like Brawlhalla actually helped me do a lot of things in the fighting game community that I always wanted to do, but just didn't have the time or ambition to do on my own. Like I started going out to tournaments because I was researching how to do Brawlhalla tournaments. I got to meet and work directly with Rick from Combo Breaker and Javeli, who runs CEO, because you know we had Brawlhalla at those tournaments and we worked with them on you know, like sponsorships and all that stuff. I ended up getting to know just about everybody in the Blaze Blue community because it's actually super small. And so, you know, it's not a super popular game, but it was my favorite. Like, that's the only game I've ever gotten like top. What was I think I finished like 17th in one tournament.
You're
like
top
at a major. Yeah, I got out of pools at Combo Breaker and finished like 24th or 25th, something like that. Like, so top 32. When they were running like the league for it on Smash UG, I was like top 50 US. And I did some content for it because there weren't a lot of content creators before I yelled at Coefficient and told them to start making more content. If you know Coefficient, I don't know if you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he and I were like the only people streaming Blaze Blue for a while, and I hit him on. I was like, "Hey, you need to do more, man, because I don't have time for this. I'm tired all the time. I don't have the creative energy left to do this at night. So like, you go like just make more content. People want this stuff." And it's been great watching him grow ever since like Dragon Ball dropped. Like he got a huge uptick in like followers and stuff from just covering like this anime fighting game scene. But yeah, it's been really cool. Like I love fighting games, my favorite genre of all time. Like it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's part of why I like constantly harp on like combat design in all games, because if every game developer was a fighting game player, they would understand how to make combat games more engaging. And it's just, I don't know, it's been like a part of my life now forever. And it's been really nice just like being an established part of that community, and knowing a lot of the amazing people who are, you know, making the wheels churn and, you know, putting in all the blood, sweat, and tears to make things like Evo and Combo Breaker and CEO and, you know, all these things just happen. Like it's so much personal investment, right? It's not like, oh yeah, we got this investment, man, and like we just all this money. Like, you know, it's like, no, it's like people like giving up their lives to make a tournament happen where 300 people can go. So it's been interesting watching them try to transition to the fact that we don't have any events, you know, with people trying to sort out online stuff. But yeah, fighting games are dope. I still have. This is still my original Tekken tag box from 2001.
Yeah. No, is it 2001 or is it 2000?
I think it might have come out in 2000, but I probably played it the most. I still got the instruction manual in here. This game's
nice.
Changed my life, man. So good. So yeah.
So what's your thoughts on potentially Tekken Tag Tournament 3, or how do you feel about Tekken Cross Street Fighter? You know, it seems like we're in an era now where crossover fighting games are happening like left and right. And you know, I still would like to see it. I know a lot of people I know in the FGC are like, no, that time is past. Just keep giving me more Tekken 7. And I'm like, Tekken 7 is kind of getting up there in age right now. Like that game's.
I mean, it is, but like, so the thing is we're in the first era of Japanese fighting game developers embracing post-launch content, right?
Yeah.
So for the first time, we're seeing people like, oh, instead of like, you know, instead of releasing the same game 7 different times,
yeah,
you know, with just updates and new characters, it's like, oh hey, Tekken 7 has been, you know, in development and in the arcade since what, in the arcade since 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And then in development for at least, you know, 2-3 years before that. So you've got you know, this game that's been around for a really long time, and Tekken 7 is arguably the best Tekken game ever made, right? Like It has the best engine, it has the best netcode, it has the biggest array of characters, and it has like the best balance, I think, out of all of them. Because a big part of what prevented me from getting into Tekken during my like resurgence into fighting games was if you went and talked to the Tekken community. Tekken 5, people just complained about Bob, and Tekken 6, all they did was complain about Steve, right? Like that's the whole conversations. They were like, "There's no point, man. You're just gonna see Steve like every round, like." Ugh. Which may or may not have been actually true, but like that was the blanket of nonsense that hovered around that game. And it's funny because over the last 5 years, like I've done a lot of evangelizing with people where I'm like, hey, like if you like a game, you can't talk about it like this. Like you can go and like bitch about a high tier character all you want, but like if the conversation becomes don't play this game because Steve's busted, guess what? People will not play the game. And like to me, like that has started to slowly shift over the last, like I'd say 3 to 4 years, because people realize that like that type of, and it's also helped because forums aren't a thing anymore.
Yeah.
So you don't run into that static SEO as much. But yeah, it's something where like the state of Tekken right now, I think is awesome. Like they had a little bit of a hiccup there when they released Leroy, but
Oh God, yeah.
yeah,
Leroy's everywhere.
Tekken's great though. It's like getting into Tekken 7 again and like learning the system now as like a veteran fighting game player was an absolute pleasure when it came out on consoles. So much fun.
Yeah, and one of the things like because I've stuck with Tekken 7 since the console release. I actually have it on all platforms, so it didn't really matter like what do we want to play it on, we can play it on it. I've seen the different patches and how like the gameplay has really just been balanced out over the years, and the whole Leroy era. Everyone had Leroy, and also like playing Street Fighter 5. Like I recently picked that back up as of this week after not having touched it in like a year. And what's interesting about that is with Street Fighter 5, like that, I don't want to say it's the most controversial Street Fighter.
It is though.
It is. I don't want
though.
like I don't want to say, but it is. But like when I look at it, I look at the different stuff like that went into it, like how people hated it at launch, how broken it was at launch, especially coming off of Street Fighter 4. Like it just I have a love-hate relationship with Street Fighter 5. But when I went and played Champion Edition, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, I've heard that Street Fighter is in a much better spot now.
Yeah.
The only thing that's preventing me from getting back into Street Fighter is the netcode. And
it's still atrocious.
And so that's kind of the challenge. And it's funny because if you've been looking at the Guilty Gear Strive conversation, there's been like a lot of evangelizing by the player community for them to put in rollback GGPO style netcode. And they finally buckled on it and said they would do it. So it's something that has been very difficult to get Japan to move on previously because it's literally not a problem in Japan. Japan is the size of like 2 states over here. So like, they don't need communication that works across 5,000 miles the way that we do. And then also like they weren't really proactively listening to us until around 2016. When things really started to change, which is great. Like that means honestly, like I think people have been referring to the last few years as like the golden age of fighting games, like because outside of Street Fighter, like every other fighting game that we've had has been amazing. We've had a bunch of indie fighting games that have found really, really strong success. People have kind of gotten past, because of Street Fighter 5's hiccups, the community at large has gotten over the whole like, I only play Capcom games, or I only play 3D, or I only play anime. Like all that's kind of disappeared, largely in part because of Dragon Ball FighterZ, which really brought together a lot of people from all the different communities. But there's so much less bias and like stigma than there used to be in the games fighting games community when it comes to what you play and why. And even for the folks who have been loyal to Street Fighter this entire time, like I don't play Street Fighter. There's lots of people who don't play it competitively right now, but everybody who does play competitively, we all respect them for that choice. We all understand why, and there's no more of this like, oh, you're playing that game,
Yeah.
like now there's so many great fighting games. Like this year was going to be my tournament year before COVID happened. Like this was going to be my like back to glory. I'm getting back on the circuit. I'm going to train up Grand Blue. I'm going to get out of pools at Combo Breaker again in a new game. Like, and honestly, when Grand Blue dropped, I was so hype on that game because it's anime Street Fighter by Arxis. Like it's Street Fighter basics, all fundamentals, it's footsies, and it's a perfect game for an old man like me. I can't do scrambles anymore, man. I can't be bouncing around playing marble. Or, any of those like, oh yeah, just like convert into 3K off a straight hit. It's like, no, man, I'm too old for that. So I got to play something with neutral. And so Grand Blue comes out. I'm super excited on this, man. I'm like so hyped. It comes out. I get the Japanese version. I'm playing on day one. I'm streaming it. I made content. I actually sat down and put like 50 hours into a video. I hadn't done that in an entire year. Like that's how excited. Like you can look at my YouTube channel. There's like a year between the Grand Guide I made and the Akatsuki video that I put out the year prior, right? And so I went to a local. I was beating up all the people who get like top 8 Dragon Ball and Guilty Gear. And I was just like, what? You ain't got nothing, Scrot. You ain't got nothing. You angry? Oh, geez, so angry. You got so salty. There were people like cheering and stuff. I was like, yo, watch this conversion, son. And it was awesome. Man, I was so hype on like, I took that shit with me to PAX. I had a setup in the lobby. Like I was like beating everybody. I didn't lose a single game in that video game for like a week. Like I went like a whole week. I played like 300 matches, didn't lose a one. It was amazing. And then COVID happened, and now so no more tournaments. no more effort going into that. Now I'm part of the FGC retirement home community on Final Fantasy 14. So so that's my story. Now I play Final Fantasy. Oh Lord.
Oh my God. No, dude, like that's the thing too. Like when you look at how, like one of my friends, Max Splicer, he's a YouTuber that covers like the FGC. And one of the things like he talks about is like the Capcom only players, or the Street Fighter only players, and how like the same thing you said, like, and I mutually agree. Like when Street Fighter, let's be honest, they fucked up at launch. It allowed people to see that, hey, there's something else.
Yeah, there's other options. Like there was a whole series of content. I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a whole series done on like how to transition from Street Fighter to Guilty Gear.
Was it Core A?
No, it wasn't Core A because he doesn't really do guide oriented content.
Yeah.
He normally focuses on like these bigger ethereal topics, which is why I love him. I actually got to meet him at Evo one year, and I was like fanboying out on him in front of my own booth. Like it was kind of wild. But yeah, he's one of my favorite people because he puts out such thoughtful stuff. But this was more done by like by one of the Guilty Gear community members, where he was like, hey, like if you're thinking about coming over to Guilty Gear, here's how to look at it as a Street Fighter player. Like here's how footsies works, and here's how neutral works, and all this stuff. And I think stuff like that's really important. Like I made a guide for Tekken on how to get into it as a 2D fighting player. Like, hey, here's some things like, guess what? Crouch blocking in Tekken is bad. You can't crouch block in this game the way that you do in 2D games because lows don't matter. Lows are not important. What blows you up is mids. Those are basically like overhead attacks. They'll hit you if you're crouching. So you don't want to get blown up. So you got to get used to, blocking while you're standing, which is weird. And things like that. Like I really try to encourage people to experiment with their fighting games and not just stick to an IP. Like I had this personal struggle when BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle came out because BlazBlue, you can see the poster over there. That's my main. That's Tsubaki. She's my girl. So the thing about it is like BlazBlue, I love to death. I've been playing that game since it first launched in the United States. I dropped Street Fighter 4 for that game because I just love the mechanics so much. I love the character design so much. And when they announced the cross tag battle, I was like, oh, this is sick. I'm getting more Blaze Blue, and I'm getting crossovers with all these other fighting games that I like. This is going to be awesome. And I played it for 6 months before I realized that I just didn't enjoy the gameplay. And it's not because the game was bad. It's just because the way that I enjoy fighting games is not what cross tag battle is, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not. I like my slow, methodical, like hard reads, neutral oriented, like I'm out thinking you, not I'm out scrambling you, I'm out maneuvering you, I'm, converting converting off stray hits, like I can't do that type of fighting game, and I didn't realize it for the longest time until that happened. And that's kind of how I think about all this stuff now, is like I will buy every fighting game that comes out, and I will play it for a couple weeks, and if I'm still having a blast, then I'll go enter tournaments. But past that, it's like there's so many fighting games, you literally can't be good in all of them. There's just way too many, which is great. It means everybody gets to kind of find what they enjoy and what they like the most about it, and play what they enjoy.
Yeah, and to touch on what you were saying too, like I feel the same way about cross tag battle. Like I'm heavy into Eunice. Like I'm a huge hardcore Eunice player, and getting into that series, like that, playing Eunice for me like was like getting back. Oh yeah, dude, we got to get some matches in. We gotta get some matches.
Man, I ain't netcoding to Hawaii. That 8-frame delay. The sad thing is I haven't even played clear. Like I made guides. I wrote the Akatsuki video I was talking about. I made that because there wasn't a combo video for Akatsuki. Like the character that won Evo. There was no video explaining how Akatsuki combos worked. I haven't even played the new version because of it came out right when Granblue did, and also the COVID thing. Like Eunice, I originally signed up for Combo Breaker. I was gonna play Eunice, Granblue, and Blaze Blue, because I knew if I tried to play more than that, it just wasn't gonna work. Like God, yeah, Eunice is so good, man.
It really is, and it's like for me, like I play Akatsuki, I play Hyde, but Line is my main in Eunice. So when I start playing cross tag battle, I'm like, this is just not for me. And even like when it comes to like Blaze Blue, I'm a Jin main. Like Jin's my guy. It doesn't feel right. Like it's just not for me. And I'm not trying to knock anyone who enjoys cross tag battle. Hey, I'm happy for you. It's just not for me.
Yeah. It's different things for different people, Like there's a few folks who can kind of transcend that, like I live in the same region as Fame. So like Fame, I first met him at like the local, when I first started going to locals in 2016, 2017. I remember I sat down with him. I had no idea who he was. It's just some kid. Sat down at the setup, and we played for like 2 hours, and I think I took like 2 games off of him. And and it was wild too, because this was like right when Susanoo came out for Central Fiction, and he was playing Susanoo. Everybody was like, this character's bad, and he was just like, no, he's good. Just watch. Like the man is on another level. Being able to play with a player that's that strong, like levels you up so fast, it's wild. But he's been able to do, he's been successful with Blaze Blue, with Guilty Gear, with Cross Tag Battle, with Dragon Ball Fighters. Like there's a certain level of player that you can get to where they're just like, I just learn how to manipulate the systems and play smart and win games. And definitely one of those folks. But yeah, it's God, I love fighting games, man. I love it. It's just hard. Like I can't get motivated to stick with them and grind them without like locals or tournaments anymore. It's very hard for me to find that motivation. So it's been nice like taking time off, but yeah, once all this gets fixed and we've got cures and vaccines and things start to go back to normal, like I'm really looking forward to getting back out to tournaments and hanging out with folks in person again.
Definitely. All right, so we winding down to the Q&A section, being very respectful of your time. We got a question from Jeffrey D. He said, what about Power Rangers Fighting Edition?
All right, so Power Rangers. I haven't played it. All I do is I keep up with Dacid Bro's posts because Dacid Bro, man, that guy is like evangelizing for that game constantly, and I love it. I kind of stayed away from that because it's a tag fighter, like, you know, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle and Marvel and Dragon Ball Fighters. Like, I kind of realized that, like, I just don't enjoy those games. So I skipped it, not because I didn't think it looked good, because I thought it looked great, but because I was at that point where I was like, I'm just not going to play tag, you know, games anymore. Like, I can't. That's not that's not for me.
Okay, so Gamerthon TV's question is for you. He said, thoughts on Mortal Kombat as a series? Are you a fan?
Yeah, man, Mortal Kombat's freaking great. Like, Mortal Kombat's like everyone, especially folks like our age, right, who are like, you know, grew up in the 90s and so we all have a Mortal Kombat story about the time we went over to somebody's house and they had it and we were like, oh god, can we play this without our parents freaking out, and like, you know, or my mom bought this for me by mistake. Like Mortal Kombat's fantastic. I think that the recent entries have really been a huge evolution for like kind of all the wandering about that happened in like basically between 3 and 8. Like there's a lot of experimenting and a lot of ideas, none of which really like kind of connected with people.
Yeah.
But the recent Mortal Kombat games have been freaking amazing. Like I really, really enjoyed X. Like MKX was probably the Mortal Kombat game I've spent the most time with. 11's super impressive. 11 has like fantastic online and like online features and stuff, especially with the way that they deal with like levers and rage quitters and stuff. And like 11's also done like a lot of really interesting experimenting with like the system. I don't really play them competitively or try to play them competitively anymore because I've kind of realized that I don't like the way that their neutral game works. You know, where it's like very zoning oriented and very like conversion oriented. But it's like Mortal Kombat's awesome. It's fantastic. Like, it's Mortal Kombat, you know. Like, I think it was one of my son's favorite fighting games for a long time because he could beat me in it. Because I'd be going in there like trying to do MKX stuff, and he'd just be like, "Lol, Scorpion, Dad, you can't block this," you know, and like that's super fun. Like, because he definitely gets into different fighting games than I do, and I'll still go play with him and do all that stuff. So that's pretty great.
Awesome. Spirit Shock, he has a question. He said, favorite installment of Blaze Blue for fighting game mechanics alone?
Oh, it's definitely Central Fiction, man. Like the most recent Blaze Blue, I think, really tightened up a lot of things while also like solving problems that they had introduced along the way. I know like a lot of legacy players for Blaze Blue have different mixed feelings about the overdrive system and the way that works, but like for me, the way that I look at it from a like broader design perspective is like what you've done is you've given everybody a reversal option. You've given everybody a tool that says, hey, I can blow this person up if I know this is where the gap is in their stupid block string that they keep doing, and they think that I don't have a choice because I don't have a DP. But guess what? You're wrong. Overdrive. Here's 8K. Go sit your ass down. Like, so yeah, I really Central Fiction has just been awesome. God, I love Blaze Blue. I can't wait till they make Blaze Blue 2, man. BB2. Just go give Arc System Works all your money once Guilty Gear Strive comes out so they can take all that and put it in my next Blaze Blue game, okay? That'd be great.
Okay, cool. One Eye Seen in 3D asks, what underrated or obscure fighting game do you think needs more love? I got one. Rage of the Dragons.
I don't think I've even heard of that. That must be really obscure.
Super obscure.
Oh my goodness. Honestly, like probably the most relevant one right now that could use some more love is Them Fighting Herds.
Oh yeah.
If you're not familiar with Them Fighting Herds, it is the evolution of fighting is magic. The the My Little Ponies fighting game that got made and then had a takedown order back when they were like voting games into Evo. In like 2011, 20, I don't know when it was, but yeah, so the game's actually really good. It has GGPO netcode. It's in Evo Online mainly because of the netcode, but it's also just like a really good game. I spent a lot of time with it around when it launched, and like it's very creative. It's got a lot of like really interesting moves and kind of like ways that they've integrated ideas from like Blaze Blue and Skullgirls and even like Rising Thunder with the way some of the moves work, and it's really really smart. It's just weird because it's all ponies and furry animals and llamas and stuff, but it's actually a really good game. So check it out. It's on Steam. I think it's on console now too. I don't know.
I think so. Nero Altus, his question is, he says it's mainly involving Ghost of Tsushima. What are your main hopes for the game?
So Ghost of Tsushima is kind of interesting because it's one of those where it has had a lot of hype built up around it, and I've never really understood why. Other than the fact that it's like PS4 exclusive, they got Sucker Punch working on it. It's been hyped up for a really long time. So what I try to do with games like this is like, I know there wouldn't be this much effort put into hyping it up if they didn't believe that they had a fantastic game on their hands. And looking at a bit of the gameplay today, I'm like, okay, so I'm feeling a little bit of Tenchu. I'm feeling a little bit of Assassin's Creed. I got some mini ninja vibes in here. And also it just looks gorgeous. Like, I'm a huge fan of like stealth oriented gameplay, so like I'm watching a lot of that and getting excited. But usually what I end up doing with these things is I kind of, all of the hype and the reveals and all of the information that leaks and all that stuff, for me, I intimately know that all of that's just marketing. And the whole point of all of that is to get you to decide whether or not to buy it. I've already decided I'm going to buy it. Like, I knew I was going to buy it years ago, right? So for me, like, I'm just looking forward to when it releases, when I can have it in my hands and when I can enjoy it. Like, I think it's one of the things we almost rob ourselves of when we get too excited about every little detail or reveal or piece of information. Like, that stuff's good and it's great if that gets you jazzed up, right? If that gets you excited, then yeah, embrace that stuff. But for me, like, I found that when I do that, I can't just kind of like blissfully enjoy something without being too biased or too like, oh, but it didn't sound like it was going to play out this way, or I saw in the screenshot that was actually from an alpha that it was going to look like this and it doesn't. Now I'm upset. And so I just try to play things on their own and have fun. The game looks great, so I'm excited about whenever we're going to actually be able to play it.
Okay. Last question I'll take from Zero, and then we'll wrap up. Zero Fanatic says he wonders, he wants to know if you've ever played Millionth Arthur. It has both Reese from Trials of Mana and Yori from King of Fighters.
Million Arthur Arcana Blood, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I played it like once because they brought it out to the local and everybody was hyping it up, and I was just like, that looks ridiculous. I played a few games, no idea what was going on. It was super fun. But yeah, I remember at the time that game came out, I was still very focused on like learning Unist, because it came out the same year that Knight's Climax had its first year in Atlanta, which is where I reside. So I was like, I need to focus on Unist so I don't embarrass myself at this local tournament that people are traveling for.
All right, and since we got the questions out of the way, man, I have to ask you the most important question here. Did you have fun?
I did. This has been delightful. My voice is really tired now, but that's fine because tonight the only thing I'll be doing is probably playing Valorant and saying plant, 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 like over and over again.
Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
No, not too much. If you want to find out more about what I do, you can follow me at Raidhyn on Twitter. Go follow at Samurai Jack Game. That's the Samurai Jack game that I'm working on that we're going to be putting out this summer. So if you need some traditional samurai action game before Ghost of Tsushima happens, we can see if that lines up or not. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. This has been real nice.
Awesome. And I've left links in the chat as well as in the description for your social media outlets. Definitely give them a follow, and you'll be able to catch this episode of the podcast along with everything else. As you guys know, we do live stream podcasts every week on YouTube and Twitch. It'll also be available on everything. I'm going to read it off because I'm lazy and it's right in front of me, and I don't care if you judge me. It'll be available very soon on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as if you want to support the show, the podcast, and what we do here, we have Patreon available, completely optional. Whatever you guys invest into me, reinvest. See, I'm tired of talking. Reinvest into the channel and the production. And with that being said, Dan and I are signing out. We will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope it was informative, engaging, and you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you go ahead and leave a rating and a review. It greatly helps out the podcast and helps the platforms that we're on go ahead and promote us more so that more people can check it out. And if you're wondering what all platforms we're on, aside from what you've listened to it on, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And if you want to support the podcast, then we've got Patreon, so patreon.com/Mekel Kasanova, which allows us to continue doing what we're doing. If you're looking for this in video format, we're also available on twitch.tv/Mekel Kasanova, as well as youtube.com/Mekel Kasanova. So with all that being said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast and the #1 podcast in the Pacific, the Kasanova Podcast. You have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.